Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic? Let's do it. Serious. What's a local rumor you heard as a kid that turned out to actually be true? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. The most popular boy in middle school disappeared after 7th grade. Literally, his parents sold their house and moved to a new house nearby, but pretty secluded. He enrolled in a really expensive private school and cut off all ties with his friends. At the same time, a really popular male social studies teacher went on leave. Rumors circulated that the boy was molested by the teacher, and that's why they were both gone. The other popular kids got really pissed when people said that because they really liked the teacher and the kid. Eventually, people stopped talking about it. Fast forward to senior year in high school. He shows up at our prom as the date of his 5th grade girlfriend. First time anyone had seen him in years. Apparently, he reached out to the girl to ask if she had a date because he wanted to see all of his old friends one last time. Apparently, he was molested by the teacher during tutoring sessions at the teacher's home. The school district and his parents agreed to bury it in exchange for tuition to the private school. He never wanted to leave and really resented his parents for it. By the time prom rolled around, he was 18 and they couldn't stop him. He wanted to set the story straight and let everyone know he was sorry for just disappearing. The girl in my school was rumored to have been dating one of the teachers who was married. This was probably true because after graduation, the teacher had retired, divorced his wife, and married the girl. The vagrant-looking man used to collect cans from local parks and whatnot. Imagine someone pushing a shopping cart in tattered clothing. Rumor was he was generationally wealthy, and when he passed away, he left a fortune to the Parks and Rec department to update facilities. One of my 4th grade teachers seemed a bit creepy and loved taking pictures of his class. A few years later, he got busted with a few gigabytes of CP on his computer, and this was in the 90s. Much later, like after I'd finished high school and college, I decided to Google his name again. He got out of prison after 8 or 9 years, and then within a year got busted again and immediately went back. This older kid had this lightning streak scar all over one side of his neck and down his body. The rumor was he was throwing stuff at the power lines behind our neighborhood. Turns out he was. He was throwing copper wire at it, and it arced. Lucky to be alive. Doctor in town, who was a huge football booster, gave prescription painkillers to high school kids. He passed away before it all came to light, so he never saw justice. Lots and lots of kids through the years unsurprisingly became addicted. This is a little more lighthearted, but when I was in elementary school, probably like 3rd grade, all the kids in my class would joke about how our primary teacher and our Spanish teacher liked each other. We were all little kids, so of course it was just dumb little kids joking about around. That is, until a few years later when I was in middle school and I found out my old teacher and Spanish teacher recently got married. That a quiet and polite dude we knew growing up was a murderous and ruthless gang leader. We used to go to his parties. We saw him on the town and always exchanged pleasantries. We would see him at the bar, and there was little indication he was not to be messed with, until one day we bumped into him at a parking lot. Again, exchanging pleasantries, how are you, what's going on this weekend, etc. A truck pulled up a couple of spots over. He said, "Just a sec," and calmly walked over to the guy. A short conversation ensued, and he opened the driver door and started pummeling the guy, like on top of him in the driver's seat, punching down. We were stunned. After a short while, he got out of the truck and walked back to calmly finish his conversation with us, like nothing happened. We saw the truck pulled away, so we think the guy lived. A few years afterwards, more rumors surfaced about him, and it made sense that they were true. Until one day his arrest made international headline news. He received a heavy sentence for a ton of different crimes, likely won't ever be free, and his affiliates are still doing business. That if you rode bikes or four-wheelers down this certain trail, an old man would come after you and attack you. A few years later, some kids were riding four-wheelers down that trail and the old guy shot and killed them both. Damnedest thing. They'd already left his property before he caught up to them, and he killed them on public land. I'm pretty sure he died in prison a few years ago. One persistent rumor that went around during high school was that one of our biology teachers was having sex with students. We all thought it was a joke because the guy was rather ugly looking, and we all knew his wife, a fellow teacher, was always around. Years pass, and I find out that the male teacher was found having several relationships with underage students. He got arrested, divorced, put on the SO registration, and lost custody of his kids. U.S. Midwest. Rumor has it that way up the old road out of town, somewhere in the woods, was a satanic cult that held seances and other mystical rituals by firelight. Scared the willies out of us kids, and our parents wouldn't let us ride our bikes anywhere on that road. Decades later, I was working on a commissioned history project for the town and talked to the old man who owned the oldest homestead in the county, way back in the woods along that road. While photographing the creek that ran through the stone foundation basement of the home, which the settlers used for water generations ago, I noticed the burned out tea candles everywhere. Guy lit up and said, yeah, back in his younger days, he and his wife used to host elaborate costume parties at the property, often by candlelight for the fun of it. He'd heard the rumors of the satanic cult and thought it was hilarious, so he and his friends ran with it and held parties in monks' robes and had bonfires and lived it up. He still laughs about it, and now so can I. It sounds like a perfect front for what they were actually doing in that house, right? I mean, come on. There was a rumor at my high school that the building down the way was a cult. It wasn't unheard of to dare people to go over there, and then you'd end up being followed or sometimes invited to dinner. Turns out it was the HQ of the cult of the Duggars were in, IBLP. I was watching that documentary and my mind was blown because all the high school rumors had been true. I have two, both about elderly men. First, there was an elderly man that could be seen walking all over town, long gray beard, usually seen in tattered clothes. Walking Man, or the Silver Bullet were the nicknames for him. The rumor was he was actually really wealthy, but lots of people just assumed he was homeless because he was always walking, carrying groceries or whatever. Well, about a year before he passed, it came out that he was actually one of the wealthiest residents in our town when he donated millions to local youth programs and schools. Turns out, he just liked walking a lot and placed no value on material things like clothes or cars. Second, there was an elderly man who was actually homeless. The rumor was that he drank himself crazy some years back and just never got help. He was in and out of jail a bunch, but always seemed to be given slack by law enforcement. The truth is tragic. He did drink himself crazy, out of necessity. He was a paramedic. One night, he responded to a wreck that turned out to be his wife and daughter had been hit by a distracted driver speeding on a narrow road. Neither survived. Understandably, he was never okay after that. He would sometimes check the pizza shop I used to manage for spare slices. Broke my heart that all I could do was offer him some free pizza. Hope he can rest in peace now, Red. Always heard rumors that this kid who I rode BMX with, his dad was a high-ranking member of the Hells Angels. One day, we're over there years later chatting shit around the fire in his backyard, and about 70 patched members arrived at the house for a meeting. They brought us a shitload of beer and told us to find a park to drink in for a few hours while they had their meeting. That our neighbor was a pedo, married with kids. One day he drops dead of a heart attack. When the family started going through his stuff, they were so disgusted apparently he just sold the house as is with the furniture and everything. Rumor about a local businessman who tried to end it all was rescued. Some weeks later, he ran into a burning building and rescued 2 young children, sustaining severe burns in the process. A few months ago, I saw him in the pub on the green. All of the skin in his face and hands had melted, and he had skin grafts everywhere. Happiest man in the pub. Hero. There was a rumor in our high school that a teacher was a pedophile. We didn't know who exactly it was, but we had some guesses. We found out, a long time after that, the supposed teacher pedophile had AR'd, tortured, and murdered a few kids over the years, and he got caught after the cops started investigating. I think he slipped up somewhere, but I'm not sure how they found him. Turns out he was a predator pedo artist the entire time during school, and that we weren't aware since he'd prey on children and not teenagers. Hope you rot in jail, Mr. Sanders. When I was in high school, there were rumors about a kid in my class awing a bunch of kids. He was a very weird kid. Everyone assumed it wasn't true or just a mean rumor. During a class, another kid said something to him about it. He angrily shouted, "Nothing has been proven yet." The entire class just stopped and awkwardly stared at him. That was 30-some years ago. He's still in prison for awing dozens of kids while working in his church's nursery. We had a rumor about there being a white horse in the woods behind the movie theater in our town. There were a couple homeless people living there though, so no one went and checked it out. Well, before seeing a movie one day, me and a couple of friends decided to make the trek. We stumbled past the makeshift camp and found a small path that led to a fence. We stood there for a couple seconds, and then, seemingly out of nowhere, a majestic white steed came trotting toward us. We snapped a quick pic in an early 2000 cell phone of our friend and the horse, and got the hell out of there. The pic looked absolutely fake, and no one believed us about it to this day. When I was a child, Shakes Kane, we had the legend of the baroness. Supposedly, she lived in a haunted house and drove around in a pink hearse. When I was old enough to drive and explore on my own, I finally saw her in her pink hearse. She also did live in a house that would have coded as spooky or haunted to a small child. It was just an old house with neat architecture. In 2008 or so, a kid was shot at a park by adult drug dealers. The news and reports stated he was some kingpin in the weed trade and had made tens of thousands before getting popped. His parents denied, until investigation found out he started selling to pay his parents' mortgage and had in fact been selling weed in large quantities. Kid was 15. There was a rumor that a couple of guys after a party took a drunk girl and assaulted her in the car on the way to a field. She died by suffocation, and to hide the evidence, the boys put firecrackers in her mouth to destroy dental evidence. Then they buried her and came to school the next day like nothing happened. Well, it was true, as my film teacher told us the story in detail and showed mugshots. Kid in my 3rd grade class was always late to school. I'm talking, he once showed up to school 5 minutes before classes were released to go home. The rumor among parents and teachers was that his mom was an alcoholic and the dad lived a couple towns over, so he often had to wait for his dad to take him or take care of his mom until she was well enough to drive. This was a private school with no bus. She died of liver failure a few months ago, according to Facebook. Makes it so much more effed up that everyone knew, including the teachers, and didn't have any sympathy for him. I distinctly remember the teacher telling him on multiple occasions that it was his responsibility to show up on time. He was 8. Was he supposed to drive himself? Makes me so sad, and I hope he's doing okay now. The park we used to play football at used to be a cemetery. They exhumed all the coffins and moved them years before I was born. We'd freak each other out, especially at night, saying there were still bodies buried there. One day we were playing, and they were doing some groundskeeping work, and they found a coffin. The state came out and found 30 more. We were actually playing on top of hallowed ground. In middle school, our janitor was this kind of mean, gross dude who kids were real mean to, making fun of him and giving him shit nicknames like Dirty Dan. But he also happened to be one of the best friends and middle school girlfriend's dad. The rumors kids threw around were that he was a pedophile and a child predator. I went to their house many times and even stayed over once or twice. He was an asshole, and so was his son, and the house was absolutely disgusting. But my friend needed company, so we didn't just leave. It was a sad house, and she was clearly sad, but all she ever said was that he was an angry guy. Years later, I've lost contact with my friend, and we've all graduated high school. The summer after graduation, the janitor and his son were both arrested for CP and assault. I never felt so nauseous as I did reading that article. I wish I knew how she was doing. Very local, as it was around the office and not town in general, I worked for this manager who people always said was off in some way. No one was really sure. He was always fair and decent to work for with me, but I kept hearing people say that heard things from other people. He'd say some things that made people feel pretty uncomfortable. At one point, he supposedly made a joke about killing his roommate because she made him angry, so you wouldn't want to make him angry, shit like that. I never heard any of it firsthand, but I also didn't talk to the managers that much. He left very suddenly one day, and the rumor was he was fired because he said or did something effed up during the morning managers' meeting with the company higher-ups. After that, it was always a bit of debate with my friends that worked there if he was really a good person or not. They got answered pretty definitively a few months later when he went to prison for life for the murder of his roommate. He claimed self-defense, but it was ruled that beating her dozens of times with a hammer, immediately maxing out her credit cards and draining her bank account, then telling her adult children their mother had taken a sudden vacation, doing a decent act with the body, then throwing the body off the balcony and into the bushes by the parking lot, was probably not, in fact, self-defense. There was this asshole in my junior high school gym class, real bully type, and when he would act out, everyone would ridicule him for his mother being a crack whore, and we would laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh. Well, it turned out it was true. There was a public confirmation in the paper, and his bullying made a lot more sense because it turned out his home life was what you would expect from someone having a crack whore mother, and no one talked about it anymore, and we did not laugh so much anymore. Ironically, I think he felt so ashamed when everyone found out that he actually stopped being such a dickhead. There was a summer camp in East Tennessee my scout troop used to go to that was out of council, so we had to be invited, and there was this hike that was part of the first year's class. Class was pretty much how to not die at summer camp. That took you to this beautiful overlook that gave gorgeous views of the valley and part of the Appalachians we were in. Thing is, this overlook was outside of camp property, or so we were told, so they had to get permission every time they took the kids out there, and the area was strictly off limits to everyone. Of course, rumors and legends were everywhere in this camp, and being in the mid-2000s, one of them was that if you went to the overlook at night, the lights in the valley below spelled gay. Keep in mind, gay was the funny word back then, and everything among middle and high school boys was called gay. Now, we'd heard this legend for years, and one year, due to shenanigans, my troop got up to, we were told we wouldn't be invited back the following year. So, a couple of my friends got together on the last night of camp and said, you know what? If we don't go tonight, we'll never be able to confirm or deny the legend. So let's sneak out and put this thing to rest. So we snuck out, after lights out, took the 2 to 3 mile hike to the overlook, and I swear, right hand to God, the lights below actually spelled out, in messy but clearly legible letters, capital G-A-Y. We all kinda just stood there for a few minutes in stunned silence, because absolutely none of us expected it to be even partially true, and I'm sure no one believed us when we told them and thought we were perpetuating a lie, but I swear it actually said that.